My name is John Miller. I'm 35 and I own a local hardware store in Glendale, California. I've been married to Emily for 7 years. We have a beautiful 3-year-old daughter named Sophie, and until recently, I thought we had a pretty good life together. Emily and I met through mutual friends and hit it off instantly. She was full of life, with a smile that could light up any room. She was always supportive of my dreams and stood by me as I built my business from scratch. Our relationship had its ups and downs like any other, but I always believed we had a strong bond. We laughed a lot, had fun together, and shared many interests. Emily loved to cook, and we'd spend weekends trying out new recipes. She was also incredibly good with Sophie, always finding creative ways to keep her entertained and happy. Those moments made me feel like the luckiest man alive. But there were challenges too. Emily could be stubborn and had a tendency to bottle up her feelings. Sometimes she'd get frustrated with my long hours at the store, and we'd argue about how much time I spent working. Always thought these were normal marital issues that we'd work through. Despite the occasional fight, I never doubted her love for me. Emily had a way of making me feel special. She'd leave little notes in my lunch or surprise me with a home-cooked dinner after a long day. We had our routines and traditions, like movie nights and Sunday brunches, that made our life together feel warm and stable. I was deeply in love with her and committed to making our marriage work, no matter what. Looking back, it's easy to see the cracks that started to form. But at the time, I was blind to them. Thought we were just going through a rough patch. Emily started working late more often, and she seemed more distant, but I attributed it to stress from her job at the salon. I never imagined that these were signs of something much deeper, something that would eventually tear our family apart. It all started a few months ago when I began to notice subtle changes in Emily's behavior. At first, it was small things. She'd spend more time on her phone, often texting someone late at night. When I'd ask who she was talking to, she'd shrug it off and say it was just a friend from work. I didn't think much of it at the time, but something felt off. Then there were the late nights. Emily had always been home by 6 p.m., but suddenly she started working late more often. She'd come home tired, with a vague explanation about extra clients or staff meetings. One night, she didn't get home until nearly 10 p.m. Remember feeling a knot in my stomach, but I pushed it aside, telling myself she was just working hard. One weekend, we were supposed to have a family day. We planned to take Sophie to the park, something we used to do often. But Emily received a call in the morning and told me she had to go into the salon for an emergency appointment. I was disappointed, but I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. Still, the way she rushed out the door felt strange. Another time, we were at a dinner party with friends, and I noticed Emily seemed distant. She was glued to her phone, barely engaging in conversation. When I asked her what was wrong, she brushed me off, saying she was just tired. But it wasn't just the phone. She seemed more disconnected from me and from Sophie. She used to be so attentive, always playing with Sophie and making sure we spent quality time together. Now, it felt like she was always distracted, her mind somewhere else. I remember one specific night when she came home late. She smelled different, like she was wearing a new perfume. When I asked her about it, she got defensive, saying I was being paranoid. It was a small thing, but it stuck with me. I started to wonder if there was something more going on, something she wasn't telling me. As the days went by, these little moments piled up. Emily's behavior continued to change. She'd get home late, make vague excuses, and seemed increasingly distant. Couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I started paying more attention, looking for signs, trying to understand what was happening to us. The more I looked, the more suspicious I became, but I still hoped it was all in my head. I didn't want to believe that the woman I loved could be hiding something from me. As the doubts grew, I knew I couldn't ignore them any longer. I needed to find out what was really going on with Emily. It started innocently enough. I began paying more attention to her behavior, noting the times she came home late or seemed unusually distracted. But soon I found myself going further, crossing lines I never thought I would. The first thing I did was check her phone when she wasn't around. I'd wait until she was in the shower or had left it unattended, then quickly scroll through her messages and call logs. At first, everything seemed normal, but there were a few texts from someone named M that caught my eye. They weren't explicit, but they were frequent, and she'd delete some of them right after reading. My heart sank, but I needed more proof. Next, I started asking her friends casual questions, trying to see if they knew anything. Most of them seemed as clueless as I was, but a few times I caught awkward glances and hesitations. It was clear they knew something, but didn't want to get involved. That only fueled my suspicions further. One night, I installed a GPS tracker on her car. It felt wrong, like I was betraying her trust, but I was desperate for answers. I needed to know where she was going during those late nights. The tracker showed that she was spending a lot of time in a neighborhood far from her salon and our home. That information sent a chill down my spine. I tried to confront her, but she always had an excuse ready. Clients, errands, things that didn't add up. My behavior started to change. I became more withdrawn, constantly preoccupied with my suspicions. I'd catch myself staring at Emily, searching for any signs that might confirm my fears. Our conversations grew strained, and the distance between us widened. Couldn't focus at work, my mind always racing with thoughts of what she might be hiding. I felt a mix of fear, anger, and hope. Fear that my worst suspicions were true, anger at the possibility of betrayal, and a small, desperate hope that I was wrong. I remember one particularly bad day when I followed her after she left for work. I stayed a safe distance behind, heart pounding in my chest. She drove to that same unfamiliar neighborhood, parked, and got out of the car. She met a man there. Man I recognized from a photo she had shown me months ago. Mark Stevenson, a real estate developer. They embraced, and my world shattered. I felt a surge of rage and heartbreak like I'd never known. I wanted to confront them right then and there, but I was frozen, unable to move. Returning home, I felt like a different person. The mix of emotions was overwhelming. Fear, doubt, hope, and anger swirled inside me, changing from moment to moment. I knew I had to confront Emily, but I was terrified of what I might hear. My heart ached, and I felt a deep sense of loss, as if the life I thought we had was slipping away before my eyes. The day I learned the truth is burned into my memory like a scar. It was a Friday evening, and Emily had texted me earlier, saying she'd be working late again. I felt that familiar knot in my stomach, a mixture of dread and suspicion. I decided I couldn't take it anymore. Had to know for sure. After putting Sophie to bed, I drove to the neighborhood where Emily had been spending so much time. I parked a few houses down from where the GPS tracker indicated. My heart pounded as I sat in the car, debating whether to go through with it, but I had to know the truth. I got out and walked slowly down the street, trying to stay out of sight. As I approached the house, I saw Emily's car parked outside. I felt a lump in my throat, but I forced myself to move closer. Through the window, I could see them, Emily and Mark Stevenson, sitting close together on the couch, laughing and looking into each other's eyes. My heart shattered, unable to take it anymore. I knocked on the door. The laughter inside stopped abruptly. A moment later, Emily opened the door, her face going pale when she saw me. "John, what are you doing here?" Emily said, her voice shaking. "What am I doing here? What are you doing here, Emily?" I shot back, anger and pain mixing in my voice. Mark stood up, looking uncomfortable. "I think I should go," he said, but I ignored him. "Emily, how long has this been going on?" I demanded, my voice breaking. She looked down, unable to meet my eyes. "6 months," she whispered. "I'm sorry, John. I never meant for you to find out like this." I felt a rush of emotions: shock, anger, betrayal. "You've been lying to me for 6 months. We have a daughter, Emily. How could you do this to us?" Tears streamed down her face. "I didn't plan this, John. It just happened. I fell out of love with you, and I found someone else. I felt like I was going to be sick. Found someone else. You found someone else while I was at home, taking care of Sophie, working my ass off to provide for us. Is this why you've been so distant, so secretive?" Emily nodded, still crying. "I'm so sorry. I know I've hurt you, but I can't keep living a lie. Want a divorce, John? I want to be with Mark." The room spun around me. I felt like I was drowning. "A divorce? Just like that? You're willing to throw away everything we've built together for him?" Emily looked at me with pleading eyes. "It's not just about him, John. I haven't been happy for a long time. This isn't the life I want anymore." I was speechless. I stumbled back, feeling numb. "I need to go," I mumbled, turning away from her and walking back to my car. As I drove home, tears blurred my vision. I couldn't believe this was happening. The woman I loved, the mother of my child, had been unfaithful for months and wanted to leave me. That night, I sat alone in the dark, trying to make sense of it all. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions: anger, sadness, confusion. How could I not have seen the signs? How could she fall out of love with me and not tell me? I kept replaying our conversations, our fights, trying to pinpoint where it all went wrong. The next few days were a blur. I felt like I was living in a nightmare, going through the motions but feeling detached from reality. I wanted to wake up and find out it was all just a bad dream. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. Emily had made her choice, and I had to figure out how to move forward for Sophie's sake, if not for mine. The morning after finding out about Emily's affair, I felt like a ghost drifting through our house. Sophie's laughter echoed down the hall as she played, completely unaware of the storm brewing between her parents. I knew I had to confront Emily properly and make sense of everything, but I had no idea how to start that conversation. That evening, after putting Sophie to bed, I found Emily sitting at the kitchen table, staring at her hands. Took a deep breath and sat down across from her. The silence was heavy, like a weight pressing down on both of us. "Emily," I began, my voice barely above a whisper, "we need to talk." She looked up, her eyes red and swollen from crying. "I know, John. I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you." "Then why did you?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Why didn't you talk to me if you were unhappy?" Emily sighed, wiping a tear from her cheek. "I didn't know how. It felt like we were growing apart, and I didn't know how to fix it. Then Mark came along, and it just happened. Just happened." I repeated, feeling a surge of anger. "You've been seeing him for 6 months, Emily. That's not something that just happens." "I know," she said quietly. "I've been selfish, and I'm so sorry, but I can't change what's happened. I just want to move forward for all of our sakes. Shook my head, trying to process her words. Move forward? How do we move forward from this? You want a divorce. You want to be with him. What about Sophie? What about us? We'll figure it out, Emily said, her voice trembling. We can work out a custody arrangement. I'll never keep Sophie from you, John. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. The reality of losing my family, of splitting time with Sophie, was unbearable. I don't want to lose her, Emily. I don't want to lose us. Emily reached across the table, taking my hand. I know this is hard, John, but we're not good for each other anymore. We've been unhappy for a long time. Maybe this is for the best. I pulled my hand away, feeling a mix of pain and resentment. For the best? For who? You get to run off with Mark and start a new life. What do I get? She looked down, tears falling onto the table. I'm sorry, she whispered. I never meant for it to be like this. The conversation left me feeling hollow and more confused than ever. For the next few days, I tried to make sense of everything. Called Lisa, our neighbor and friend, to tell her what had happened. She was shocked and offered to watch Sophie so I could have some time to think. John, you need to take care of yourself, Lisa said. This is a lot to process. Don't hesitate to ask for help. I nodded, appreciating her support. I also reached out to Robert, my mentor and father figure. He had always been a source of wisdom and comfort. John, this is a tough situation, Robert said, but you're strong. You'll get through this. Focus on what's best for Sophie and take it one step at a time. I decided to move out temporarily, taking a few clothes and essentials. Staying in the house felt unbearable with all the memories and the constant reminder of what had been lost. I found a small apartment nearby and began the process of filing for divorce. It was the hardest decision I'd ever made, but I knew it was the only way to start healing. The support from Lisa, Robert, and even Sarah, a business consultant friend, helped me through those initial dark days. Each step felt like wading through quicksand, but I knew I had to keep moving for Sophie's sake. She was my anchor, the reason I couldn't give up. Every night, I'd sit alone in my apartment, thinking about what went wrong and how I could rebuild my life. The road ahead was uncertain, but I was determined to find a way to move forward, to be the best father I could be for Sophie. Life after the affair was a series of difficult adjustments. The first few weeks were the hardest. I felt like a part of me had been ripped away, leaving a gaping hole. I moved into my small apartment, trying to make it feel like home for Sophie and me. The silence was overwhelming, and I often found myself lost in thought, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. The affair forced me to take a hard look at my life. I realized I had been so focused on work and providing for my family that I had missed the signs of Emily's unhappiness. The realization was a bitter pill to swallow, but it also made me more determined to change. I promised myself that I would never neglect the people I loved again. The positive changes came slowly. I started spending more quality time with Sophie, taking her to the park, reading bedtime stories, and just being present. Her laughter and innocence were a soothing balm for my wounded heart. I also began to take better care of myself, going to the gym and eating healthier. The physical activity helped clear my mind and improve my mood. One evening, after picking Sophie up from Lisa's cafe, Lisa pulled me aside. John, you're doing great. Sophie is happy, and you're looking better. But don't forget to take care of your emotional health too. Maybe talk to someone. I nodded, knowing she was right. I decided to see a therapist, someone who could help me navigate the emotional turmoil. Dr. Patel, my therapist, was patient and understanding. In our sessions, I talked about the pain, the anger, and the confusion. She helped me see that it was okay to feel all those things and that healing was a process. John, it's important to allow yourself to grieve, Dr. Patel said in one session. You've lost something significant, and it's natural to feel a range of emotions. My friends were also a great support. Robert, with his years of wisdom, offered practical advice and a listening ear. John, remember that this isn't the end. It's a new beginning. You've got a chance to build a better future for you and Sophie. Lisa, always cheerful and supportive, often invited Sophie and me over for dinner. One night, while watching Sophie play with Lisa's kids, she said, "You know, you're doing an amazing job. It's not easy, but you're handling it with so much grace." Sarah, my business consultant friend, became a more integral part of my life. She offered not just professional advice, but also a compassionate shoulder to lean on. Our conversations often went beyond work. "John, you have to give yourself credit," Sarah said one afternoon over coffee. "You're rebuilding your life from scratch, and that takes incredible strength." Gradually, I started to find a new rhythm. The hardware store became a place of solace, where I could lose myself in work and forget my troubles for a while. Threw myself into growing the business, and it paid off. The store thrived, and with the financial stability, I felt more confident about the future. However, it wasn't all positive. There were nights when the loneliness was unbearable, and the thought of Emily and Mark together made me feel physically ill. The anger would flare up, and I'd have to remind myself to stay calm for Sophie's sake. Seeing Emily during custody exchanges was always awkward and painful, a constant reminder of the betrayal. The journey to recovery was far from linear. There were setbacks and moments of doubt, but with each passing day, I felt a little stronger. I learned to lean on my support system and to accept that healing would take time. Most importantly, I realized that I had the resilience to overcome this, and that gave me hope for the future. Life has a way of surprising you, both in the best and worst ways. Now, several years after the affair, I can finally say that I found a sense of peace and stability. My hardware store is thriving, and I've built a life that feels whole again. Sophie is now a happy, energetic 6-year-old who lights up my world every day. The bond we formed is unbreakable, and I treasure every moment we spend together. Emily and I have managed to establish a respectful co-parenting relationship. It wasn't easy, but we both knew that Sophie's well-being had to come first. We've learned to put our differences aside for her sake. Seeing her smile and thrive is worth all the effort. The affair changed me in many ways. It forced me to confront my own shortcomings and to grow from the pain. I've become more self-aware and more appreciative of the people around me. I have learned the importance of communication and not taking anything for granted. Sarah, my business consultant friend, has become a significant part of my life. What started as a professional relationship blossomed into a deep, supportive friendship, and eventually into something more. Her presence has been a source of strength and joy, and I'm grateful for her every day. To anyone going through a similar situation, I want to share some advice from my own journey. First, allow yourself to feel the pain and process it. It's natural to grieve the loss of what you thought your life would be. Don't rush through it. Seek support from friends, family, or a professional. Talking about your feelings can be incredibly healing. Remember that healing is not a linear process. There will be ups and downs, good days and bad. Be patient with yourself and celebrate the small victories. Focus on what you can control and take it one step at a time. Rediscover your passions and find activities that bring you joy. Rebuilding your life can open up new opportunities and strengths you never knew you had. Most importantly, hold on to hope. It might seem impossible now, but things will get better. You have the resilience to overcome this, and you will come out stronger on the other side. Surround yourself with people who lift you up and remind you of your worth. As I reflect on my journey, I can see how far I've come. The affair was a devastating blow, but it didn't define me. It was a catalyst for change, and in many ways, it made me a better person. Life is unpredictable, but it's also full of second chances and new beginnings. If you found the story interesting, please subscribe to the channel, press the bell, and don't forget to give us a like. Thanks for watching. See you all soon.